大家好，欢迎收看加密世界。今天跟大家分享著名资深投资人与网红安东尼·庞普利亚诺就目前高油价为什么对黄金和比特币有不同的影响的问题。对 Wise 多策略顾问有限公司的首席投资官兼总裁 Jody Visser 专访的第一集动荡时期的比特币。
What about Bitcoin and gold? It seems like both of those assets, for a minute there, gold was selling off, Bitcoin was running. Now, towards the end of this week, we've seen Bitcoin kind of cool off a little bit as well, as I think, still some of the sets in people's minds.
So there's a few things that are interesting. So since the war started, Bitcoin is, I think, the best performing asset by a good amount too. Gold has now fallen sharply, and I think it's down 8 or 9% since the beginning of the war, and Bitcoin is up 5 to 6 since the beginning. Which is an interesting dynamic on itself. Now, I said it last week, I'll say it again. Some of this is just mean reversion, meaning gold had outperformed significantly. But I do think there's a couple things going on with inside the Middle East. You've got the UAE focused on liquidity for the banking system. So they're already having to pump money into the system. We do have an inflation issue that has picked up. And even though gold is a good theoretically inflation hedge, not if it means rate cuts are going from 0 to up. Bitcoin already discounted this, so it already got ahead of it. If we're going to have a recession and private credit is going to become a bigger issue, then I'm going to go back to my thesis for Bitcoin, which is they're going to have to do something to provide liquidity to the system. If you can't get the oil price down, I hate to say it, guys, but if private credit is worsening, they're going to have to do something for private credit. I wrote about it last week. I'll say it again. This is my belief that the 1970s are the most important thing for Bitcoin, not in the fact that inflation in the 1970s was high. We all know that CPI got up to higher levels than in 2022. Then it came down, then it went higher again, then kind of went sideways. It just never died. We could be in a 3-year period where now that oil prices are no longer sitting there, and I think we're in a commodity bull market, where we could have headline inflation stay high. Core inflation for services could come down because of the deflationary pressures on AI. The deflationary pressures on AI are crushing software, and they're crushing anything built on code. And like I've said, if you at the end of this year are sitting there and you realize that the S&P 500 was unchanged or down slightly, and next year there's not a lot of hope for anything changing because we're still in a commodity bull market and people are like, what's going on here? We've got a credit problem. We've got this. Then all of a sudden people are looking for growth assets and they look around, and I think Bitcoin will be the best performing asset this year when you put it in the growth bucket. And if that's the case, we already have the momentum. So I'm going to keep pounding the table that the best thing for Bitcoin is a continuing credit problem, which I don't think can be resolved on itself. And at the same point, having a commodity a bull market, which is based on scarcity, and then a shorting of abundance, which is based on these growth assets. If all of that plays in,
Bitcoin's like uniquely positioned.
It's uniquely positioned.
Yeah. The Middle East is much more open to the idea of Bitcoin than Asia is. And so really last year, the talk was like the Chinese central bank, right? The Asian countries, they're the ones who are de-dollarizing, de-fiat, currency. Now we're talking about the Middle East, and the Middle East seems, and you can see it in the headlines, right? Some of their sovereign wealth funds, they've bought the ETFs. We've seen them participate with the stablecoin stuff. They're trying to really kind of financialize and tokenize and do all stuff. Maybe that is part of that, decoupling of gold and Bitcoin, or maybe the inverse correlation is that actually we're moving from a China capital flow dominant narrative to a Middle East capital flow dominant narrative. And if that's the case, then their asset is more Bitcoin than gold, whereas China was the opposite. Does that resonate?
Yeah. And here's what I'm going to do. So I agree with you. And I think that is
nice.
I think everyone should care about this topic because I'm saying that Bitcoin's going to come out of this as the asset that macro funds and everyone needs to add to their portfolio as we get closer to the end. You just brought up a topic which I completely agree with, which is we are going to have a pivot in the globe where the Middle East now, which is in chaos. What do you want to hold and store? Gold. There's rumors that the reason gold has been falling is because Middle East sellers have shown up. Whether or not that's true, I think the love affair with gold for India, for China, for the places there, relative to Bitcoin, when you already said something, they're already involved in this, but they're also involved from a sovereign level of really buying into AI.
下次节目我们分享专访第2集。 数字经济体系在动荡不定的中东地区的诞生。以上节目内容纯属业余爱好视频资讯分享，与投资理财完全无关。谢谢收看。